Yeah, the call wild's always bringing me home. Call wild's always bringing me home. Call wild's always bringing me home.
Hello, wild ones. Welcome to another episode of the Find Your Wild podcast. I'm very excited to have Gabrielle Cerberville here today. Sorry about that. And you probably know her on Instagram as Chaotic Forager. And congratulations again on your brand new book that just came out, Gathered on Foraging, Feasting, and the Seasonal Life. So
thank you
welcome.
so much.
Yeah.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited because foraging is something that I've always found interesting, but definitely seems like there's just so much knowledge, and I'm excited to hear more about how did you even first get into foraging?
Yeah, I mean, I've been foraging since I was little, and I think something I like to tell people is it is truly something that we are evolutionarily equipped to do. You know, little kids figure out how to forage on their own sometimes. So we have an innate sense of self-preservation. We have an innate sense of risk assessment and pattern recognition. And so we are good at these things. And I've been foraging since I was about 4 or 5 years old.
Wow.
And yeah, my first forageable food was wild blueberries, which grew wild all around where I grew up. And ever since then, it's just been a whole journey of adding new things over time.
Yeah, that's really incredible. That's so cool that you started so young. And is that something that you just knew that there were blueberries, or you learned that mostly from your parents?
Yeah, I actually talk about it in the book, but I learned from a neighbor
Cool.
who had adult kids and had grown up in the house right across, his kids had grown up in the house right across from mine. And when my family built our house and moved to the area, he said, my kids used to pick these and they're blueberries.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I love that, passing on the knowledge, right? As if his kids or her kids were out of the house already, let me pass it on.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So that's such a long journey to know how to forage, and even from such a young age. So when did you start to become maybe even more knowledgeable about it?
I would say that when I was about 23, 24, I really started focusing a lot more on foraging more intentionally. It's just something that I always did,
Yeah.
I was sort of primed to notice things, and I foraged all throughout college and after college because I was broke and I was hungry, and it was a nice way to supplement with things that I otherwise wouldn't be able to afford. But I didn't really get into mushrooms, which are kind of my biggest love, until I was about 25 years old and noticed them on a trail run.
Yeah, there's so many. I actually have been noticing a lot more mushrooms, although I leave them there. Um, but there's always something so interesting about I don't know, once you notice mushrooms and where they grow and how many they grow. But I know that there's also a lot to know about mushrooms. So what is kind of when you first started looking into mushrooms, what was your very first mushroom that you ended up foraging?
Yeah, so my first mushroom was a honey mushroom, Desarmollaria caspitosa, a ringless honey mushroom, out in Indiana where I was living at the time. And it was really interesting because a lot of the skills from foraging plants do translate over to mushrooms, but you kind of have to apply them a little bit differently. And it is there's definitely this kind of increased sense of connection. So when you're looking for mushrooms, you don't usually start by looking for mushrooms. You're looking for trees. You're looking for certain environments. You're looking at a specific time of year. And that is true with plants, but it is true to an even greater degree with fungi.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? Because they grow in such particular places, and you really have to be aware of the time of the year as well, so that it breeds the mushrooms, right?
Yeah, and you can, I guess that with plants, there is a certain degree of predictability. They'll surprise you every now and again. You'll just be like, what are you doing here, my friend? But with mushrooms are constantly it feels like they are constantly looking for ways to defy categorization. So it'd be like, yeah, mushrooms require these really specific conditions, unless they're this mushroom that will just grow on whatever it wants. Or, there'll be like this mushroom that you never find outside of this particular setting, except, there's an iNaturalist observation for it, like way out of the way. So yeah, there are a lot of ways that fungi do try to sort of defy categorization and make it really difficult for you to put them in a box.
Right. And I know a lot of them kind of look like each other, right? Like there's a lot of misidentifying mushrooms. I mean, as well as plants, right? There's always like, you got to make sure you're reading them correctly because one may look like one, but it's not. And maybe that one's toxic. So like, how do you differentiate between stuff that looks like very similar to something else?
Yeah, so I often kind of shy away from lookalike language because something that may seem like a lookalike to one person might not seem like a lookalike to another. I think that sometimes we have this idea that like mushrooms in particular are like trying to trick us.
Sure.
And they're not. They are who they are. Mushrooms never lie. They always will tell you who they are if you spend enough time like observing them and really take your time to just go through all the steps of identification. Really the best way to avoid mistaking something for something else is to take that time and to really sit down and try to look at what's in front of you and not what you want to be in front of you. And to really learn what the different parts of certain mushrooms are, what the different parts of certain plants are. And it's funny, my friend Alexis Nicole, Black Forager, has this series that she does. One of these is poison and one is a snack. And I think she does this, she does this really well, where she's like, okay, here are all the features of these two plants. And they look really similar at first, but when you get to the end of the video, they feel like totally different plants because they are, because you've taken the time to actually look at all of the different features and know. And sometimes those differences are super subtle. Sometimes it's a smell. Sometimes it's a texture. Sometimes it's like this one has a little ring and this one doesn't. This one has a slightly shaggy stem and this one's really smooth. So there are a lot of subtleties. So you can never be too careful. And the best foragers are going to be the people who really, really value observation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said about, not wanting something to be, what you want it to be in front of you, right? Like, I live on Long Island, so there's a very small population of river otters by me, and I've been looking for them, and I thought that I saw otter tracks, but they were actually raccoon tracks. So I really wanted it to be otter tracks, but that's not what it was. So sometimes we just have to, and they're still very cute, but sometimes we just have to like really notice and, because I guess like there's a difference too, right? Like when you really look down to the differences, like you were saying, they aren't actually that similar, even though they may look it. So it just helps you with your knowledge of like deepening, and then you start to realize all of the intricate details that are super important to what you're picking.
Totally. My friend Sam Thayer calls it banana confidence. The idea that we know what a banana looks like. And yeah, maybe you would mix it up with a plantain, but we can also, because we know what bananas look like and we're so familiar with them and we handle them and we see them in the grocery store all the time, like we can also spot the differences and we could probably even describe the differences. And you are already equipped to be able to do that. Humans are equipped with incredible pattern recognition, and it's a skill that you can learn.
Yeah, that's really cool. And speaking of learning, I know your book kind of goes into kind of basically like how to forage. Like, what are some really good beginner tips on like how do you become a forager?
I think that you start by trying to tap into your inner 7-year-old. I say this all the time. I think your inner 7-year-old is the best forager that you will ever be, because your inner 7-year-old is not afraid of not knowing something. You have to be comfortable with not knowing things if you're going to be a forager, because I'm a good forager. I know my stuff, but if you picked me up and you plopped me down in the middle of Arizona, I would struggle because I don't know all of those plants. So I don't know those ecosystems as well as the people who live there do. So I would need to ask questions. I would need to be curious. I would need to use my skills to look things up. And so often we're more afraid of being wrong than we are of like the consequences of being wrong.
Makes
and
sense.
so we need to like be unafraid to ask questions and be curious about things. I think that if you want to start foraging, you should start by not worrying about whether or not you're going to find food, but asking yourself, what is that plant? I keep seeing that plant and I don't know what it is. And, you know, using tools like iNaturalist, like foraging forums on Facebook and Reddit, using books and other resources, and really just like trying to add on to your body of knowledge. And the more you do that, the easier it gets to learn new plants and to learn new mushrooms.
Yeah, and we live in a time, right, where it's relatively, I'm sure, a lot easier than, you know, back in the day. We have these resources like iNaturalist and other people we can ask easily through the internet and not get confused, I guess, like with like a reference field guide or something like that, even though I'm sure that's very helpful. But yeah, and talking about how different areas, right? Like you could be really good in one area, but it's all about the knowledge that's close to home, right? I mean, it's going to change from wherever you are, the different types of environments that you're in.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are plants that I can find here that I can't find 3 hours south of me, or I can't find 3 hours north of me. Foraging is a super local area of expertise. And, you know, you take the forager out of their location and they can figure things out. Like the skill of learning is one that's always going to translate, but they'll struggle, you know.
Yeah. What's like what are some good traits to have as maybe just like a general forager, right? Like if you're going to maybe like you move around a lot, but you still like to forage, like, or you know you're moving, like what are like some good basic foraging skills you should have?
I think knowing how to identify a few of the common plant families is a good one. So learn how to identify an oak tree. You know, learn how to identify your mustards. Mustards are always going to have flowers that have 4 petals and a little cross. You know, they have a very specific sort of leaf structure. Learn how to identify mints. Mints are another one that's like pretty straightforward. With mushrooms, like learn how to identify enough trees that you can generally make some predictions about where certain mushrooms are going to grow and when. And don't be afraid to use your resources. Like look things up. Anytime I go somewhere new that I haven't foraged before, I do a little digging and I'm like, what grows around here? What plants am I likely to find? What things do people put in the landscape that might be edible? It can be a good place to start.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you know, I also think that there's something really valuable, right, with starting to learn and know the plants around you, because also in like an ethical sense of like what's an invasive species, right? Like I always find that very interesting is like I think especially by me, unfortunately, there's a lot of invasive species. So it could be honestly just generally helpful maybe to like your local, you know, like population of like other people would be like, hey, you know what, I saw an invasive plant or something on the trail, like thought I should let you know, which leads me into like, you know, how do you be ethical while you're foraging? Because I do see that come up like a little bit, you know, like on Instagram and stuff when I'm scrolling, is like, how do you make sure that you're not taking too much or something like that?
Yeah, yeah, and I'm really glad that you brought up the point of invasives, because like there are different considerations for different organisms. So with invasives, like it is a net positive to remove those plants or fungi from the environment, because yes, we do have invasive mushrooms too. But when it comes to something that's maybe a little bit more slow growing, if you're going to be harvesting a whole plant, like you have to consider, I'm killing the plant in order to harvest this. Maybe I don't need as much of it as I think I do. You also have to consider like the limits of your own ability to store things and use things. So I try not to harvest more than I can use in a single year. Once I've hit what I think I can use in a year, I stop gathering. Sometimes I will get things for, friends and family that I know, really love hen of the woods or something. But I also take advantage of abundance in certain instances. So when it comes to like nuts, so I love acorns. They're a lot of work to process, but they're really fun and they're super worth it. So there are some years, like this year, I'm not really collecting acorns because most of the oak trees aren't producing a ton of acorns. So I'm basically leaving them for the squirrels. But some trees are on sort of like a cycle. So most oaks will mast or produce like an extra large crop of nuts like every 2 to 4 years. So on the off years, I leave them for the squirrels. During the years where there's like more than any squirrel could possibly eat, I'm out there collecting buckets of them. So, with acorns, I'm not collecting a year in advance. I'm collecting maybe 2 or 3 years in advance. So there's a lot of nuance there. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you have to use your eyes, and you have to have kind of a long view of nature and try to make sure that you're not depleting resources that are ecologically important.
Right. Yeah. Right. Like, and especially talking about like invasive and not invasive, right? Like, it's like, it's so important to think about, okay, is this maybe an important plant to certain wildlife that's near me? Or like if, making sure you leave maybe enough or, something like that. It's very, like complex, right? And if you're going to be using nature as a resource to, right, only go in there with the intention of using what you can end up using, right? Like you said, you only gather for a year. So making sure, okay, I feel like I know I'm going to be able to use this amount in this amount of time.
Yeah, and there are kind of other considerations too. So often when you hear conversation in forest circles about using nature as a resource, they are very like capitalism minded about it and going like, well, don't take too much and don't deplete all the resources. I get a lot of people accusing me of like stealing the food from the animals. But then those same people don't bat an eye when a really valuable ecosystem is being like raised to the ground so that people can like build a bank or
Right.
or like mine or something like that. So there is, I think when you spend enough time in nature and you develop that personal relationship with these places that you go to collect food, you also start to pick up on the sense that there needs to be some reciprocity there, and you need to like start taking care of those places in the ways that you can and like advocate for those environments.
Right.
And pick up trash. Like there are a lot of things you can do, and it's also like it's your responsibility because that place is literally feeding you.
Right. Yeah, you're enjoying that part of nature, right? So it's like your job to, like you said, reciprocity, right? To give a little. If I'm taking a little, I'm going to give a little. I'm going to help clean up this little area of the beach or, something like that. I think it's always really nice. Yeah, it's just the balance, right? Like nature is for us. And if we're working with nature, I think it's important to give back a little bit and help do something nice, whether that be not taking too much of one resource, or just cleaning up that area because you're in nature and using that space, I think is like such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and importantly, we are also part of nature. And the only reason to separate humanity from the rest of nature is to divorce ourselves of responsibility and to try and set ourselves above the rest of the world. But we rely on nature the rest of nature so much, to be able to breathe, to be able to drink clean water, to have food. Like, there is so much that we depend on in the rest of nature. And just because we have a certain kind of intelligence, it doesn't mean that we are any more important than anything else.
Yeah, exactly. It's a little conceited for, a lot of people to be like, oh yeah, we're number one, but it's like, I just don't feel like we're taking into account the intelligence of, like, the sentience even of, like, animals. I think even mushroom, I'm sure you're going to agree with me. I feel like even mushrooms, like, the more I learn about mushrooms, and I would not say I'm an expert at all. I'm not very good with my mushroom knowledge, which is why I have you here. But the networks that they have underneath, I think that there's a lot under the surface that maybe we don't always see as, like, our type of intelligence, but I think is intelligent in its own unique purpose and way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, humans can't even agree on a definition of intelligence. If you ask 10 different psychologists, you will get 11 different answers, because you can't define it any one way. Intelligence is situational, and we have language, but so do other animals, and so do other systems. We have instinct, and so do other animals, and so do other systems. And fungi are a really beautiful example of that, because they possess this almost infinite ability to adapt to environment, and they possess all of they really challenge our ideas of individual, and our ideas of gender, and our ideas of like life and death. They're this weird sort of liminal hinge between the two. Like they make life after death possible, which is crazy. Fungi are, like, so interesting in that way, and humanity is often at fault in a very specific way. We often don't see the value in systems that we don't immediately understand or relate to, which is part of why we're always inclined to anthropomorphize instead of to, like, set ourselves aside and try to see what's in front of us.
Right. Yeah, being able to accept things as they are. I feel like I talk about that a lot with animals, especially like wolves. They're, like, one of my favorite animals, and they're both fierce and they're loved and hated at the same time. So they're really like an animal that's kind of like on both sides of the spectrum. But just being able to, like, love and observe them for what they are. And I think that that's a value that we can bring to any different part of nature, whether that be like foraging, observing wildlife, just being in nature. There's so many, it's just an important value to have.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of shift gears into how you created Chaotic Forager. And I think one of my first videos that I saw was actually, like, more recently, but I loved the mushroom pizza that you made. It, first of all, it looked delicious. So, like, how did it come about that you created this, like, Instagram account and sharing your knowledge with everybody?
Yeah, so I actually started out on TikTok, and I'd never really done much with social media before. It was during the pandemic. I had just moved to Kalamazoo, Michigan for grad school. I didn't have any friends, and there wasn't really any opportunity to make any friends. I was in this dingy little basement apartment. It was like 250 square feet with a window that looked out on an ambulance depot. And so I was just like, I need to get out as much as possible. It was also the middle of summer, which is high season for a lot of foraging. So, I had lived in Indiana for 10 years at that point, maybe a little longer. And I just said, I've got to go find new foraging spots, and Michigan is supposed to be a good place to forage, so let's get out there. So I started going out, and as a way to kind of just keep myself creatively occupied, I'd, like, left a job where I was working 50, 60 hours a week and suddenly had nothing until school started a couple months later. So I needed something to do. I was so accustomed to working all the time that making these dumb little videos was just, it was fun. It was kind of like a little a little vlog where I was sort of documenting what I was finding and learning how to have an on-screen persona. I was so bad at first. Like people were so nice because people wanted to learn about the things that I was telling them, but they would be like, hey, so can you maybe reshoot this and put the plant in frame so that we can see it? So I'm like not naturally gifted at this, but I am naturally enthusiastic. So I just kept making these little videos, and it was like nothing. It wasn't something I was trying to do to like make a career out of it. I just wanted to have some fun. And over like a month and a half or so, I had, my videos were getting slowly better. They were getting a little more interesting. I was figuring out my teaching style. And then I had a video about a puffball mushroom go viral. And all of a sudden, there were like, hundreds of thousands of people following me. And I didn't know what to do with myself. And I had to figure out pretty quickly, like, what I was going to do with that. If I was just going to never make a video again, or if I was going to lean into it and try to make this happen. And I decided to lean into it because I was having fun, and it was a nice distraction from all of the other stressors in my life. And here we are.
Hello, wild ones. I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Find Your Wild podcast. I have some exciting news. This April 2026, me and Dr. Carla Ionescu are taking a couple of lucky people to Greece this year. It is going to be about the goddess Artemis. So all about the goddess of the wilderness, the forest. We're going to be doing amazing things like exploring her ancient sites where she's worshipped, like Boron and Eleusis, Patras, and a couple of other places, as well as doing archery and claymaking. So I hope that you're enjoying this episode. Check out the link in the description for more information, and we would love to see you there. Enjoy the rest of the episode.
Hi, wild ones. I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Find Your Wild podcast. This episode is sponsored by my clothing brand, FemmeSauvage, and you can find a discount code and link in the description. So check it out. We have a lot of amazing designs, and $5 of the proceeds goes to different charities. So please feel free to check it out and enjoy the rest of the episode. Thanks so much. Yeah, that's so amazing. And like, congratulations to you for finding like a path and like doing something that you really love, and that it worked. People, I think, appreciate that niche, and it's like, also, we live in such a cool time that people can take things that have maybe they've been knowledgeable about that, or maybe it's a hobby for them or something, and are able to kind of showcase that to everyone. And it just goes to show like how people's like unique hobbies are, or if they take that path, like how cool it is, and to showcase that, because people are excited to learn, right? I'm sure you get like so many people that are like, wow, this is so interesting. Like, how many people have you gotten messages from that are like, you've got me to start foraging or something like that?
I don't even think I could tell you how many of those messages I've gotten over the years. I mean, I've been doing this for like 5 years now, and I mean, teaching for like 5 years. I've been foraging much longer, but I think I had a conversation with a friend of mine at one point, and I was really feeling insecure, like, because I'm looking at all of these great educators online who are educating about all kinds of things. And I'm like, I'm not, nobody should be listening to me. Like, I am verbally clumsy. This makes me anxious. I'm not like so great at this, like, but people are expecting all of this of me. And he's like, well, it's because you show up. It's because like sometimes you go into these Facebook groups and people are really mean to beginners for asking dumb questions, and for not providing the information in the way that they want it, or for missing something in the group rules, and you are answering questions and you're giving people the information that they need to get going without being a jerk about it. And I was like, yeah, that's actually, that shouldn't be a big thing, but it is. It is actually important to make sure that people feel seen and safe, and like they can ask those questions. There's a reason that people stop trusting their inner 7-year-old, and it's because people make them feel bad about their curiosity and about not knowing things.
Right, because I mean, you're like this is the kind of space where you can always learn more, right? Like even talking in the beginning about how it's like foraging is so specific to a certain area and how that is going to be bound to be leading to so many different questions. I feel like you're always going to be learning and it is important, especially for people that want to get in like or learn something new. This could be with anything. Like everyone's always going to have questions, and to be able to feel safe to ask those questions and not be kind of put down is really nice. And I think there's also a really great aspect to this as well, is that there's so many people that I think learn in a visual way that didn't get that maybe like growing up, and that there's something about learning through TikToks and Instagram reels that, oh, ow, wow, that actually works really well for me. Like I'm really absorbing this a lot more than if it were just in a textbook or something like that.
Yeah, and the format really demands brevity, but you have to be comprehensive if you're teaching people. So you really have to strike that balance. Like, I mean, I remember when TikToks had to be 60 seconds, and so I had to fit all of the important information that you need to know to identify this mushroom in 60 seconds. And it gets you really good at like just distilling everything down,
Right.
and now you get a little bit more play. I think Instagram Reels cuts you off at like 3 minutes if you want
Right.
people to see your videos, but I feel like, wow, 3 minutes, that's such a long amount of time for me to like, it's such a gooey amount of time for me to get to explain something, and I can give context and nuance, and then with the book, it's like all nuance, it's all context, because
Yeah.
I never get to do that much in a TikTok or in an Instagram reel. So yeah.
Yeah. How and speaking of the book, so how long did that take for you to like write it, come up with it? It's very exciting, right? And I'm excited for you that it's like a different medium for you to be able to like give much more information and context to people.
Yeah, so I've been working on the book for about the past 2.5 years.
Wow.
I've had a number of people, like kind of the first couple of years that I had been doing foraging education online, reach out and be like, hey, we want you to write a field guide. And I'm like, I don't want to write a field guide. Those resources exist already, and I don't think that anybody needs one from me specifically. But I did have in mind the kind of resource that I would have wanted when I started foraging. And I really wanted something that was more narrative. I wanted something that really made me feel like I could see the whole process and understand what was behind some of the things that people were doing. So a lot of field guides are very straightforward. There are some that are beautifully comprehensive, but I find that you're saying you're like some people are visual learners. Like I learn best through stories. I love stories. I've always been a big reader, so I said, I bet that the experiences that I had back when I was learning how to forage, and like as I have moved through my life and made some of these like bigger connections with foraging and the rest of my life, I bet that some of that would be really helpful to a reader who is trying to grasp all of these different threads and figure out like what it is to be a forager. And what these lessons are, and how to approach the act, and how to take something from the field and recognize it and feel confident in that, and then bring it back to your kitchen and process it, and then what to do with it. So that's kind of how the book happened. And my agents were great, and they were like, "This, you're trying to do a lot here." There are like, I think 70 some odd plants and mushrooms that I talk about in the book.
Wow.
And each one of them has their own entry, and then there are narrative chapters that talk about my experiences with them, and then there are recipes, and then there are these little like forest meditations that I've added in each chapter. So it's like not a field guide and not a cookbook and not a memoir. It's like kind of all three. So that's kind of how that happened, and I was really grateful that my publisher was excited about the idea. So
Yeah, I love that, right? And especially because, right, like you're trying to make your own unique space here, because there are, like you said, field guides, and I can't imagine, right, like this took you 2.5 years. So, and and there's obviously a lot more like scientific, like other stuff in context, which you did put in the book as well, but that you would probably need to focus on if you were to do just a field guide. So, but it's nice, right? Like, and I agree that through story, I mean, that's kind of why I'm doing the podcast too, is like people really learn through stories. I mean, we are such, if we are beings of anything, I think we're beings of stories, right? We're always passing those down, and things like that. And I feel like even with foraging, right? Like I feel like even there's like a lot of stories and fables and myths about like grabbing a certain plant, or like this turned somebody into that. Like there's always like kind of like those subtle warnings to like to try to teach people through stories of all of these lineages of different foraging aspects throughout time.
Absolutely. Yeah, because foraging requires you to be like in tune with your lizard brain. You know, you have to be aware of danger. You have to be able to use your pattern recognition and make like very quick assessments of your environment. But you also have to engage that part of your brain that is thoughtful, that is nuanced, that is able to make connections, and it's all of these things at once.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's what stories are. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask you too, what are some of your favorite plants to find, to work with, to make recipes with? I know
So
there's probably a lot,
yeah,
but maybe just
there are a
few
lot.
more.
There's plants and mushrooms, or just plants?
Let's start with plants and then I'll ask you about mushrooms,
Cool.
or you could lead into
Okay.
mushrooms. Yeah.
So yeah, for plants, there are a number that I always look forward to. I love berries. I mean, in my heart, I am a berry picker. So any of the various raspberries, I love me a high bush blueberry. You put me in a berry patch and I'm happy as a clam, and I will not come out until I physically cannot fit anymore in my body. 'Cause I bring my own bucket. And
Yeah.
the built-in bucket. Then I also love I love a lot of the greens that come out in the spring and the summer. So I'm a big fan of Allium canadense, which is another one of our native onions, similar to ramps, but not nearly as long-lived. They are a little more I guess easy to harvest in some quantity without stressing too much. I love to forage invasives. I love to clear those paths, and I love planting native plants when I remove invasives, so that they kind of have a fighting chance. I
that's nice.
use a ton of stinging nettle too. Any kind of singing nettle, wood nettle. They show up all the time in what I make.
Yeah, and I feel like I always hear nettle in like the witchy circles as well. Like that's a very popular witchy plant.
It is, and I'm not a witchy person myself. A lot of people assume I am just because like they've seen the inside of my house, and I have more jars than I know what to do with. But it is such a good tasting plant. I love introducing people to it because it's better than any green you've ever had. Hands down. Better than spinach. It's better than baby kale. Better than arugula. It's just so much better than any of them.
Oops, sorry. I think it got stuck for a second. You there?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. I am.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that's really cool though. And I read somewhere that I think it was from I don't know if you follow this account, Ancestral Habits on Instagram. I feel like it would be right up your alley, but she talks she gives a lot of insight into like what our ancestral habits were like when we were, like in the beginning of like being hominids and stuff like that. And one of the reels that she came out with was how we can see, as humans, we see green as the I guess we can see more shades of green than any other color. And it makes a lot of sense considering, you talking about how we're made for pattern recognition and how important that is with foraging and being able to differentiate between different plants and mushrooms and things.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes a lot of sense. We've had to We've had to differentiate between greens for a long time.
Yeah, yeah. So it makes a lot of sense, and I feel like it makes me appreciate more when I'm like out in the forest and stuff, and like, wow, I can see so many different shades of green. you know? Now I want to ask you, I guess, like, what are some of your favorite mushrooms now to like kind of use or find when you're foraging?
Yeah. So, usually when people ask what my favorite mushroom is, I'll say chanterelles because they're very flexible. You can use them in sweet foods. So, like, I make apricot or peach pie with chanterelles. You can use them, you can candy them, you can use them in savory dishes. So, like, throw them in a pasta, throw them on a pizza, whatever you want to do. I
Wow.
also am a big fan of like hen of the woods, Gryphila frondosa, which is out this time of year. You can find it at the base of big old oak trees. Actually, I've found a good amount of it on Long Island.
Oh,
You just
cool.
have to, yeah, you have to go to like some of the little pocket parks or some of the bigger parks and look for those really big old oak trees, and you'll sometimes find one at the base. Um, yeah, especially as you get a little closer to the water. Then. Um, Also, there are some that are just they're just like cool and fun to find. There's a mushroom called the matsutake mushroom, Tricholoma magnivelare, which there are a couple of them now, not just magnivelare, but that one is if you've ever read the book The Mushroom at the End of the World, that's the mushroom at the end of the world. It's this really interesting flavor and smell. It's kind of like red hot and dirty socks or fish.
Oh,
And I'm
wow.
not making it sound appetizing, but it is so good and you can actually eat it raw in small quantities. So
Wow.
anytime I find that, which is not around where I live, I have to go like up to the Pine Barrens or to Michigan or
Mm.
out to the West Coast. But whenever I do find it, it is a huge treat and I get super excited.
That's cool. It sounds like a very complex mushroom, like at least in regards to
Super
taste.
complex.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's polarizing too. Like some people are just like, this is disgusting. Um, and then other people are like, no, that's my jam right there.
That reminds me of that fruit. That like I think
Durian.
that yeah, yeah. That like
Yeah.
monster looking fruit. I feel like that's like a people like it or they don't like it.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And it's another one of those like durian kind of crosses that sweet savory border where,
Right.
it's called a fruit, but the smell is a lot cheesier than you would expect a fruit to be. And,
It's crazy.
it's expectations versus reality can sometimes throw our brains into overdrive or short us out a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of recipes, like how like I feel like you have so many different ones. How do you like find them? How do you experiment? Like how do you know like what's like, okay, this is now gonna go in my recipe book or something?
So I do a lot of experimenting. I love to read cookbooks.
Mm.
It's kind of one of my weirdo hobbies. So I read a lot of cookbooks from other countries.
Mm.
Um, I'll read a lot of like translated cookbooks. I'm a huge fan of fermentation. So if something requires some fermentation, I'm usually all about it. I'm really big into food preservation because I'm collecting a lot of food. And so I'll often kind of default to things that fall in those categories. And I will sometimes just like modify things that I like to include the things that I'm foraging. So if I'm making kimchi, maybe instead of going out and buying a cabbage, I'm going to use some of the wild greens like chicory
Cool.
or dock or something like that, or burdock to make my kimchi instead. So I do a lot of substituting in other more stock recipes. A lot of the recipes in my book are things that you could very easily swap out with grocery store stuff.
Mm.
And in some cases are like recipes that I've come up with for things that I've bought in a grocery store, but then modified because I've gone, oh, I wonder if like that would taste good with black walnuts or something along those lines.
Cool. Yeah, like sometimes one thing will lead you into another thing and you're like, oh, bada bing, bada boom, this works together,
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have to kind of be able to make those, like, recognize those patterns and go, oh, if I make pumpkin bread every year, then like maybe persimmon bread would work because it's also kind of like jammy when you cook it down, and it's good at binding things together the way that pumpkin is, and it has a lot of fiber. So like maybe that would work. And you try it. I have so many failed recipes that will never see the light of day, just because I was like, maybe this will work. And then, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I don't see that as waste. It's just an experiment.
Right. Sometimes it's like hit or miss. And a lot of those things you're trying them for the first time, right? Like you're actually creating them, so you don't know whether they're going to be good or not. But,
Right.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I wanted to ask you too, like what's been some of like your favorite foraging stories that maybe you can share with us?
This is a tricky one. I really like telling people about the times that I've been like looking for something all summer or all spring and haven't found it. And I'm just so single-minded about like, I need to find this particular mushroom or this particular plant. And then I find it and I'm just so overwhelmed and delighted to see it that I don't even want to harvest it. I just want to look at it, and just like hang out with it. I tell a lot of my foraging stories in the book, but let's see.
Yeah, I don't want you to give away too much.
There's one that I'll tell you. So I was living in Iceland for a while, and went back. I had lived there over the winter, so I didn't really do any foraging at that time. But then I went back in the following summer. I was there as a part of an artist residency. And I happened to be there right during the height of berry season. And I was super excited about this because there was a berry that I had really wanted to try called a crowberry, which is really similar to kind of like a regular blueberry. Mm-hmm. And I was with my dad. He'd come along for the journey, and my dad wanted to take a nap. So I just like went into the mountains, just walked. I don't even think that I was supposed to be there, and found the mountainside was just covered in crowberries. So I laid on my stomach and just ate my way up the mountain. And you could have rolled me down, and I probably would have exploded like in a Veruca Salt sort of fashion if you'd done that. But those are the kinds of things that I really enjoy, like just getting into the zone with berry picking, or
I love that.
Or just like sniffing out a mushroom and then realizing that I've walked 8 miles and it is now 7 p.m.
And now I have to get back in the dark.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny. Was it hard to get down the hill after you ate so many of those berries?
A little bit. I don't have great knees, so like walking downhill is always harder for me than walking up. And like when I was that full of berries, like I must have looked like I must have just been purple. Like I just had berry everywhere and all over my shirt, because I'm like literally army crawling, eating berries off the ground, and like it's because they grow really low to the ground, and it just I was like, man, I am a feral mess. But I was definitely full and very happy.
Yeah. I love that. Sometimes we just need to be a little feral sometimes,
Yeah.
Yeah,
totally.
And what was I going to say? Oh, is there like, would you say that there's I feel like there's a misconception maybe with people want to just eat something straight from the tree, or like we have to clean it. Like do people ask you a lot about like how to properly clean things that you're foraging? Like how do you know like, oh, this is okay to eat? In regards to, I guess, like,
regarding cleanliness, it is something that comes up a lot. And part of it is that we are really divorced from our food systems, especially in the West. We don't really spend a lot of time thinking about where our food comes from. So people will often talk me like I'll be eating berries out in the woods and people will go, "Oh, that's so disgusting. There's probably pee on that." And I'm like, "Do you know where your food comes from? Because it also comes from outside. And in
Right.
many cases it comes from places where they're spraying a lot of pesticides and herbicides and fungicides. And, just because it comes in a bag doesn't mean that you can just eat it.
Right.
You have to wash your food too." And some people do, and some people don't because they don't even think about it. But there is this unfortunate sense that our food is dirty because it's
Right.
coming from a forest, but then they're not thinking about the conditions of the farms that their food is coming from. And like, they're not thinking about the conditions of the workers who often don't even have places to relieve themselves with dignity, or who are not able to like have clean hands when they're working because of the pace of it all. And just because something comes from a grocery store, it doesn't mean that it's any cleaner than what I'm eating out in the woods.
Right. Yeah, because I feel like that is such a big thing, right? And it's this separation, right, between like modern times and like the wild, and how people automatically assume like the wild is like, right? Like I feel like people think of foraging like, oh, that's kind of scary. How do you know you're not going to eat something toxic, right? Or what can you find that you can eat, or even the right, like the cleanliness, like, oh, everything's dirty. It came from the woods, which is kind of ironic because it's like, that's where we started out with, right? Like that's where we, I don't know, like thrived. That's how we became a civilization, because we were able to use these things to, take care of ourselves and feed ourselves.
Yeah, and that's not to knock, like, you should clean your food. Like, you should
Yeah.
wash your greens when you get home. You should
Sure, yeah.
wash your fruit. You should definitely wash your mushrooms. There are plenty of things like, if something has a snail trail on it, I'm not gonna eat it. I'm gonna clean it first. So that's all well and good. We should be using our modern conveniences and clean water and all of
Right.
that. That is great. Just because we did something one way thousands of years ago, or even hundreds of years ago, does not mean that that is the best way to do it. Like, we have germ theory now. It's great. Love germ theory. But we also have to understand when something is just an inaccurate preconception that we have about these spaces. And we need to ask ourselves, like, how much of this is just the fact that I don't understand what's going on here? And
Right.
how much of it is my genuine concern for this person who's like eating mushrooms?
Right. There's a balance. I think that we live in a really great spot in time. Obviously, this could be taken with a grain of salt in other ways, but in this instance that I'm referring to, just like talking about like being able to use like, modern ways of cleaning our food, that's great, and germ theory and everything like that. But then balancing it with like, maybe we do need to go back to nature a little bit more, right? Like, so we can have a balance, right? Like if you need medicine, it's really great that we live in a time where you can get that if you need, but then it's awesome that we still have natural aids and remedies for things if you want to lean on that too. So there's a balance to everything in life.
Yeah,
Right?
and yeah, for sure. And you also want to make sure that you are like checking things, because like, just because grandma did it doesn't mean it's safe. And just because there's like some historical precedent for, using this plant or whatever in a medical sense, doesn't mean that we haven't learned things since then that
Right.
make that maybe not the best option. So you really have to pay attention to your sources, especially now that we have all of these AI books coming out that people are buying and not knowing are AI.
Yeah, and AI, you can ask AI something and it might give you the wrong answer as well. So
Oh, it often will give you the
Yes.
wrong answer because AI can't actually take into account a lot of the context that our senses can.
Yeah, it's very, very complicated. So go to good sources, especially with things as important as like foraging and really, especially when you're starting out too, like making sure you really know what the difference is between, those things. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, Gabrielle, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I really enjoyed having you on, and I love what you do. I think it's so fascinating, and I'll definitely be picking up your book. So let people know like where and how they can connect with you, how they can support you through purchasing your book and everything like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I would love it if you would buy my book through your local indie bookstore, because Jeff Bezos doesn't need any more of your money or mine. And you can order it directly through a bookstore. You can go to somewhere like bookshop.org. A lot of your local bookstores also have online ordering, so you can do that. But it's called Gathered on Foraging, Feasting, and the Seasonal Life. And you can find me at Chaotic Forager on all socials and chaoticforager.com.
Awesome. I'll make sure to link that below so people can easily find it. But thank you so much, Gabrielle, for coming on and your time. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed connecting and chatting with you.
Thank you. I've really appreciated it. This has been fun.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Wild Ones, for listening. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye.
To the sea, I feel the energy of life force flowing all through me, and I'll allow it all to dance